All right, y'all ready to get going? So since Alan Long is the chair and he's not able to be here tonight, and there is no vice chair.
I thought we elected a young lady last time.
Her term expired.
Her term expired, and so on the agenda is to elect a new vice chair. Do you have any idea how to make that work? We can survive without it. I'll get Brian to operate
The day the batteries died.
Operate it for me. Thank you, Dee. Any case, I'll chair the meetings. That's all right with you all until we actually get a vice chair elected, and then I can hand it over to that vice chair, whoever that individual would be. So the first thing I want to do is call the August 17th, 2015 Environmental Action Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. My name is Peter Niergarten. I'm the city's Sustainability and Resilience Director. And I'll start off by going around the room and doing an introduction. Start to my right.
Andrew Miles, Citizen at Large.
Josh Crittenden, Citizen at Large.
Aubrey Shepard, Citizen at Large.
Kyle Smith, Citizen at Large.
Rob Moore. Same thing.
Garnet Wise, Industry Rep.
Gotta be different. Mike Emery, Citizen at Large.
And we have some audience members with us as well. Would you guys care to introduce yourselves?
I'm Jessica Shaker. I work at Applebee's.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you.
I'm Katie Weaver. I work for Beach Community. I'm Stephanie Lenote.
I'm Robin Lenote. I work in Sustainability Relations.
Okay.
I'm Brian Pugh, Waste Reduction Coordinator for City of Fayetteville.
Awesome. Thank you all again
I
for...
couldn't hear where the people were from, where you work. Very well.
Yeah, I think all four of them are citizens.
I mean, you're
Who they represent?
representing a group.
Yep. Appleseeds and Feed Fayetteville. And,
I'm not really representing anyone.
okay, the citizens.
Glad you're here.
Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. First order of business after introductions is a certificate presentation to the newest Environmental Action Committee member, Joshua Crittenden. Joshua, thank you very much for joining the Environmental Action Committee. The city appreciates your participation, and we welcome you aboard.
Thank you.
Could you bump down just a little bit on the agenda there, Brian, for us? Thank you. All right. Seeing no, approval of meeting agenda. So we have our meeting agenda here. Does anybody have any additions, deletions, subtractions?
Do you need a motion to accept or anything, or do we have to go?
Sounds good.
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
To add, I'm sorry Alan's not here, but he had asked for more information on the watershed photos and things that I had shared with everybody. And if anybody wants to hear a little bit about those things, I would be happy to talk about it.
Okay. Can we add that at the end of new business, Aubrey?
Whatever, yes, sir.
All right, sounds good. So, one item to add, discussion on watershed photos. Any other thoughts, suggestions, additions? Okay, all in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Aubrey's addition?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on, we have no old business. Our new business, first item is election of a vice chair. As indicated by tonight's demonstration of the chair's absence, the primary duty of the vice chair is to run the meeting in the absence of the chair. And I don't really think there are other duties as vice chair. I think what those might be. In any case,
That might be about it.
yeah, I'll accept any nominations of yourself or your neighbor for the position of vice chair. This position would run, I believe, through the end of this calendar year. I'm pretty sure you all select a new vice chair every calendar year, so it would just be a 6-month term as vice chair.
I'll nominate Mike Emery.
Second.
Sucker.
Are there any other nominations?
You want comments?
Only if they're good.
Yeah, well, I think that's an excellent idea.
Mike, you care to make any comments?
Well, no, not really. It appears that no one else wants the job, so I'll do it.
Rise to the challenge.
All right, all in favor of Mike Emery as vice chair?
All right.
Any opposed?
Besides Mike.
Good.
Can I speak?
Thank you, Mike. All right, I'll hand the reins over to you now.
Oh, now it's my
Yeah.
show, right?
Did you know that?
See how this works. I'll
Yeah.
remember this.
Yeah.
All right, next item on the agenda is status of the NWA recycling, by Rob Moore.
All right, we can keep this pretty informal because y'all know me. And I feel like for the Environmental Action Committee, part of the reason that we wanted to put this together was to have some sort of informal internal discussion amongst the committee and any of the public that wanted to show up, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. I don't know who was at the last city council meeting, but there was a whole lot of conversation about this, and I think that it's worth spending a little bit of time talking over some of the details. Also, since I'm here representing my organization, which I'll go over in a minute, part of this is going to be looking at a regional perspective on this. The city of Fayetteville has spent a whole lot of time talking about waste, but there's a whole kind of meta conversation going on at the district level that I think is worth integrating into what we're talking about here. Brian, you can go ahead and click the next slide. So my name is Rob, y'all know me. Work for the exception of Josh, work for the Boston Mountain Solid Waste District. We are part of the Department of Environmental Quality. So we're a government organization. There's 18 of them in the state. We cover Washington and Madison County. Effectively, what we do is we funnel grant money, we do regional enforcement, education, build infrastructure, internal consulting for cities. Basically, if it has to do with the waste industry, we're probably somehow involved. We monitor our local landfill. We collect all of our local recycling data. We send all of our reports to DEQ. We serve a number of different roles and functions. The waste districts were created in the early 90s, right when recycling and waste diversion was becoming a thing, as well as when they decided to start monitoring landfills. So every single waste presentation you ever see begins with some version of a pie chart. I actually don't want you necessarily to even read this pie chart. The only reason I put it up here is to give you a kind of broad brushstroke idea that, give or take, about 50% of our waste stream is potentially recyclable, and about 30% of our waste stream is potentially divertible through composting or anaerobic digestion. Right. The reason I want those numbers to be the first thing you start with is because Fayetteville's current explicit diversion goal is 80%. Which means you recycle every single potentially recyclable item and every single ton of compost or anaerobic digestion. That's your fats, your oils, your greases, your avocado pits, all of your cardboard and paper, your soft plastics, your hard plastics, on and on and on. Right? All of that done perfectly is 80%. I think it's worth remembering that because it's a very, very impressive goal. If Fayetteville pulled off 80% diversion, actual, real 80% diversion, they would be the most sustainable city regarding waste in the country. I use that example to point out that the way we collect data is really, really important. You're going to hear data thrown out from all sides all the time, no matter what you're talking about in waste. It's really important to look at how that data is collected. Cities right now will tell you they're already diverting 80, 85, 90, 95% of their waste. They are not. Simply not the case. No one in the country is above about 75%. This is Fayetteville's pie chart. This is collected by Kessler, which is a consulting company. For those of you that don't know, the city has spent over $250,000 now on a consulting company out of Florida to come in and do a full waste stream analysis, as well as give recommendations. This is kind of the first report from them. They're still in the middle of all of this. They will be on contract through the end of the year, I believe. So you're going to hear a lot more from them. Again, this is actually good data. This is right. However, it pretty much reflects what we know. About 50% is potentially recyclable, about 30% is potentially compostable or digestible.
And again, this is the data from the waste sort that was done at our transfer station back in January. Some of you came out and participated and looked on while the consultants were performing that waste audit.
Right, and we'll get into some of the details of that report. It's worth looking up. It's all online on your website, not on the solid waste
On the
website.
city's sustainability website.
Right, and that's worth looking at. It's under current projects, and they have a whole bunch of pie graphs for you to look over. In general, we look at waste as there's 5 different things we can do with it. The first one is always reuse. This is really, really important because this is the one that no one ever talks about, because there's not an industry standard to support it. Right? There's not this massive industry saying, we need to reuse, we need to reuse, we need to reuse, because generally reuse doesn't make anybody any money. However, it always saves the consumer money. It is far and away the most economically feasible and environmentally sustainable answer that you can have to a waste problem. If you just use it again, if you sell it, if you donate it, if you retrofit it or repurpose it, that is always the highest priority. We're not going to talk about that anymore for the rest of this presentation, but it's really important to remember this because it's really easy to skip this one when you're talking about industry standards. You can click it the next 4 times. The other 4 ways we get rid of waste are landfilling, recycling, incineration, and compost or anaerobic digestion. Again, a couple of these things we can knock out right away. Compost, the city is dealing with. Via Kessler Consulting, they're about to start a pilot program, which is going to start inoculated compost. Really kind of top of the line, exciting stuff. And sweeping agreement that we should be working toward a compost system here in Fayetteville. I have yet to find a single dissenting opinion, so I don't really see the reason to address it here. Incineration is also not worth talking about because it's not on the table. Northwest Arkansas has a sordid history with incineration, and it's not something that's coming up on anybody's plate, and so again, not really worth talking about. Landfilling, just to be clear, there's a couple things I want to make clear about landfills. First of all, our landfill is in Tiny Town, Arkansas. It will probably be the last landfill built in Northwest Arkansas. Due to karst cartography, it is not easy to build a landfill here. It's super hard to build a clean landfill here. Waste management spends a bucket of money keeping that landfill clean, keeping it from sinking. It's bad. It is not an easy place to have a landfill. Second of all, that landfill is going to close in give or take 50 years. Landfills, you buy airspace, and that airspace eventually fills. At the point where you fill up your landfill, especially here in Northwest Arkansas, potentially we start exporting our trash. That's just something to know. The implications of that are super unclear because we don't have the slightest idea what the world's going to look like in 50 years.
Maybe we can burn it before then.
Yeah, sure. We've got most of our rural counties already doing that. The other thing worth mentioning about landfills when you're talking about how we deal with them is all the landfills in the United States are what's called dry tomb landfills, which means every single day you pack them down with layers of dirt or fill over them. This is important because there's no oxygen in them, so things aren't breaking down. A lot of times I'll hear people say, well, it's fine if I throw away food because it's going to disintegrate and break down in a matter of a couple of days. They have dug out sections of landfills from the 50s. There is legible newspapers. You can make a newspaper disappear in my backyard in about a week. So those things are worth mentioning. What we're actually here to talk about today, though, is recycling. Go to the next slide, Brian. And start clicking stuff, see what happens. Okay, so...
Excuse me. Could we go ahead and turn off more lights so that
You having trouble
the
seeing?
camera will show up? on
The TV has a direct feed to the
Oh, it does?
yeah, so it'll
It's
pick
picking
it
it
up,
up
yeah.
without,
yeah.
okay.
So if people have trouble seeing it, I can turn down the lights, but
Yeah. So when we start talking about recycling, there's effectively a series of steps that you have to go through. The first one is collection. We're going to talk about collection a lot here in a little bit. This is actually a picture of Fayetteville's collection system. It's a curb sort program. So somebody shows up at your door, you have your bins laid out, an individual personally handles every item into a separate compartment. When one of those compartments fill, you drive it back, you empty all of them at the MRF. The other options are you could have a dual sort or a single stream. I'll go over in detail kind of the differences and variations on both of those systems as we go. But effectively, you need to collect it somehow. Once you collect it, it goes to a material recovery facility or a MRF. Now, this is not what Fayetteville's looks like because Fayetteville has a curb sort program. Generally, MRFs are where you sort your recycling. Fayetteville, since it comes pre-sorted, they just bail at their MRF. So they spot check to make sure that nothing was missed, but in general you have a pretty clean product at that point. So you bring it in, you sort it unless it's curb sorted, and then you bale it. All recyclables are marketed as a baled commodity. So effectively you bale it, you get a truck full of it, and you sell it to somebody. What's important to remember is your MRFs are not recyclers. They are not making a product out of the product that you had. They are selling that product to the recycler. So once you sell that product to somebody, say a paper company, because that's the largest majority of our recyclable products is paper, that goes and gets turned into a product. They can either direct market that product, say they turn around and sell it to you, or with the example of plastics, you'll see them pelletize it and then sell it to manufacturing agencies. That's just a real broad brushstroke of the way that the industry works. So this is what baled material looks like. I'm going to click through that, Brian. And this is the way that we deal with the markets. So MRFs are the individual's marketing. The city of Fayetteville does its own marketing. If you're baling it, you have to sell it. This is the white sheet from August 2015. Every month, on the second of the month, I get this in an email. And this is just for fibers. So fibers are your paper products, your cardboard, your newspapers, anything that is a paper product. These are the different ways that I can sell it and the price. Click one more time. We, in Northwest Arkansas, are told to use the Southwest prices. So all of our brokers say, these are the prices that you're going to get.
That's per ton?
Yes, this is all per ton. So this is dollars per ton, and then the plus is the variation from last month.
Okay.
So as you'll see, markets are relatively stagnant. Markets are also down right now. A year ago at this time, I was selling OCC for like $1.20, $1.15, $1.20. Now it's down to 80 to 85. So effectively, that's the low side and the high side. So your brokers send you a bunch of prices within that. I use this slide to point out that this industry is incredibly complex. We do not deal with just one market. We deal with a whole bunch of markets. So personally out at Boston Mountain, we do mostly rural recycling. We're not really in competition with anybody. We try to scoop up the stuff that nobody else wants and work with our rural haulers to integrate recycling programs. So we sell a little bit of mix, but most of ours is OCC. We sell O&P, which is newspaper. We sell SOP, which is sorted office paper. These high grades right here are really important to look at because basically you either sell your mixed paper, right, your general municipal paper, as one of these, as newspaper, or as floor sweepings or mixed paper. And if you look at the prices, the price doubles when you get into your high grade papers. So sorting into multiple grades of paper can be really, really beneficial. Again, these markets change constantly. Just like any other market, right, they go up and down based on all sorts of political decisions, based on crude oil prices, have a huge impact on recycling markets, on shipping costs, on political deals, on trade legislation. I mean, all of these things are constantly moving and ebbing and flowing. If I can click that twice. Plastics are the exact same way, except they're a little bit more confusing. One more time. This is the #1 plastic bottle, right? Pretty straightforward. Everybody knows what this is. Everybody knows this is recyclable. This is the #1 black plastic microwavable tray. Both of these are the exact same base product, which is a #1. If you talk to people in the industry, we hate the numbers on the bottom of plastics because they make the consumer think that something is recyclable, right? The reason these are recyclable is because we can fill truckloads of them. The recycling industry is driven by demand. It's driven by volume. So since we have an incredibly high volume of clear #1 plastics, we can recycle them at a relatively high and efficient rate. If you can get me a truck full of these every single week, I can recycle them. I guarantee it. So the way the industry works is you start with a base product. In this instance, we started with polyethylene terephthalate, or #1. This then added color. It added another different kind of resin to be able to take heat. If I put this in the microwave, it will not go well. If I put that in the microwave, it looks gross, but it is legal. You can add resin codes for all sorts of different things. There are literally hundreds of resin codes. Traditionally, you can only recycle like entities, like resin codes. So even when Dr. Pepper 2 or 3 years ago got a really dark bottle, it was a huge problem because it varied the resin code, where if you had a bale with a whole bunch of Dr. Pepper, which wasn't a municipal problem, it was more like a coming out the back end of the Dr. Pepper factory problem, you would get these bales with buckets and buckets of a really dark resin, and it was a huge problem. So that's your traditional recycling market for both paper and plastics. You are marketing a whole bunch of different materials. I don't know what you do, Brian, back there. OCC cardboard, obviously, and then do you do SOP for your mixed paper?
Mixed paper, not SOP.
Oh, you do mixed paper? Okay, so they do, and are those the only two grades you sell?
Yeah, the newspaper, number 8, news.
Oh, you
cardboard,
strictly news, okay.
And, we are, right now, we've got a really good deal with a mill in Louisiana that's buying our chipboard as cardboard. So I'm able to get cardboard pricing for the chipboard. Now, chipboard is paperboard, like cereal box, shoe box, stuff like that.
Right.
That's what we pick up on the curb, so we've got a really good deal going with that miller.
Yeah, that's huge, and that's pretty rare. Some of them will take it mixed. We actually mix in our chipboard as cardboard, so we'll take it, but they won't do straight loads.
You might mention, just to minimize confusion, for Fayetteville, they only do the bottle.
Right, so the way that Fayetteville currently runs their program is they do number 1s and 2s bottles. They actually sort their number 2 bottles into 2 different categories. There's your opaques, which are your milk jugs, and your coloreds, which are your laundry detergent bottles and things like that. Both of those are sorted separately, and both of those are baled and sold separately. Again, there's market prices on this. So there are times where you will sell all of them together because you're getting a better price. We'll get into some of the different variables involved there. I just want everyone to understand this market is not simple. Recyclers are not dealing with one thing. We deal with between 15 and 20 different markets every day.
So ketchup bottles,
Mhm.
are they recyclable?
It depends on the ketchup. I think most of them are number 1.
Are they,
Yeah,
so
so
they're
they should be.
Because some of them, the shape of it or something,
Mhm.
you know, it'll end up back in the bin. It's like, oh, it says 1, but they didn't take it.
That's interesting.
Some might be number 7.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Laminate.
and I
It could
wonder.
be, it could be that I misread too.
Yeah,
so.
well, and that's, so again, that's the problem, is
Yeah,
when you have
yeah.
these, you end up with such a huge, there's always exceptions, and we, in the industry, we can't even keep up with them. It'll be like French's comes out with a new mustard bottle, and all of a sudden we're having a huge problem with mustard bottles.
Yeah.
Or, you know, our brokers are coming back saying, well, you need to keep out, like the Dr. Pepper's, these Arizona iced tea, switched from a opaque number 1, or opaque number 2, to a number 7. And there's buckets and buckets of Arizona iced tea drank in this county. And so we had a huge problem then. We would get these people to bring them in, and re-educating every 6 months for the consumer is really difficult.
Not to get off into too many specifics, but like milk jugs, I know I've seen advertised recently, somebody's got a new milk jug that's supposed to keep milk fresher, you know, filters out sunlight or something, I don't remember what but it still looks like a milk jug. So that's just a tweak to the resin, I guess. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it would be. I haven't heard of that.
so I don't know if it's gonna be a problem or not, huh?
Probably.
Number 2 is a go-in.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, generally, if it's going to be a problem, it will be.
Okay.
Go ahead and click next slide, Brian. This slide is actually a reused slide I used in a presentation a couple of years ago. This is pointing out all of the different companies that run MRFs in our district. The reason this is interesting is because we have about 500,000 people. That's including the 2 counties north of us. I did the 4-county district. We work really closely with Benton County as well as Carroll County Solid Waste. And as a region, that's kind of the solution we're looking for. There are regions that are substantially larger than us that have 1 MRF. So when you take into consideration the amount of shipping and sorting and labor and time and energy that is put into managing waste in Northwest Arkansas, we are as a region highly inefficient. Now again, I'm looking at this regionally. So there's a pretty large contrast between the way Fayetteville does waste and the way the region does waste. And part of my presentation here is to kind of bridge that gap and show why we're realistically working toward the same thing. The only inaccuracy here is Waste Management has bought Deffenbaugh Industries, so those are now one industry, and they have merged. We only lost 1 MRF out of that, and that actually was purchased by a different company.
Yeah, I might mention too, not that it matters, but part of that Deffenbaugh now belongs to Inland.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Inland got a bunch of the contracts that Deffenbaugh had for front-end loaders as part of the DOJ made them liquidate a whole bunch of assets because Deffenbaugh is out of Kansas City, which is a huge contract, and so the Department of Justice told them to get rid of some of their front ends, which Inland bought. Why I bring up this slide is because we have all of these different organizations working toward a goal, yet our diversion rate as a region is well under 20%. The city of Fayetteville's diversion rate is 20%. Something I really want...
The goal is 80.
The goal is 80. The current is 20.
Right.
Right. Something I want to point out really clearly, we're currently at 20%. So the status quo is not sustainable. Status quo is not where we want to be. We have to have a change of some kind. The question is, what kind of change do we want? These are the percentages of recyclable material in the waste stream in the city of Fayetteville of multifamily units, commercial units, imported trash, and litter. Imported being from our rural communities. There's some haulers that we'll bring into the city of Fayetteville. Right. Again, just to point out, even within our trash bins, within programs that are using recycling programs, we're getting at least a third of the product that's in the trash could be recycled under current practices. So what's the problem? And the problem is, effectively, especially if we stay here with these top two, we have multifamily and we have commercial. Now, if you live in Fayetteville and you live in a single-family resident, your recycling program, to be completely blunt, is awesome. You have a curb-sorted program. You get, if there's something wrong, as Connie said, it just stays right there in your yard. You have immediate feedback. There's not a lot of contamination. They're selling it at an incredibly high level. That's a really, really clean product. The problem is our community is no longer the majority of individuals living in single-family units. Right? And if you look at the construction that's coming up, we are not moving toward more single-family residents. We're moving to multifamily. Right? We have a huge influx of multifamily. Apartment complexes coming up, and recycling in multifamily is incredibly difficult under the city's solid waste and recycling services, the way they're currently designed. So the way Brian runs his program is he has guys that show up. You just hit the left arrow to go back. He'll have guys that show up at your curb, and they sort. Right? Well, if you have a multifamily, they can't do that at every single apartment. So for apartments, they have a couple of pilots in place where you have a roll-off container. It's a couple of things. First of all, if you have a roll-off container, you are assuming that the individuals living in those apartments are going to come recycle, and no matter what kind of education campaign you run, and the city has run a very, very good one when they rolled out apartment recycling, people do it at a lower percentage. Actually, a pretty substantially lower percentage. Also, it's incredibly difficult to move those containers, and Brian's operation is set up to handle source-separated material, and those roll-offs come with a whole bunch of compartments, which he now has to figure out how to dissect and dump material into the right bin. The biggest issue there is convincing these people that that's a good idea. So you walk up to an apartment manager and say, I want you to recycle. He says, okay, what's it going to take? Well, we need 8 of your parking spaces in a row. Right there, you just lost almost every single apartment manager in the city of Fayetteville, which is big props to the ones that do it, mind you, because it's not easy and it's not comfortable for them. It takes 8 spaces to move one of those roll-offs. Roll-off takes up about 3 spaces. The truck that backs it in and picks it up and drives off with it takes the other 5. Incredibly inefficient, incredibly expensive, and in general, you're going to get a higher contaminated product and less people participating. Commercial recycling in the city of Fayetteville has the same problem. The only kind of added level is the only way that commercial industry can recycle is you either get like a full dumpster, so you can get one dumpster for all of your paper or all of your cardboard, right? Or you get bins, and they're the exact same bins you have as a resident. So if you are a business with more than 3 and less than 1,000 employees, you effectively have no option other than lining up residential bins, stacks on stacks all the way back, and you pay for all of those. So it's really difficult to show a cost diversion or cost savings to a business owner if you have an incredibly inefficient program for him. The reason Fayetteville hired a very, very prestigious consulting company was because they had a really serious problem. If there was an easy solution for this that would take care of Fayetteville, I guarantee you Brian would have done it. Right. So you have this problem, you hire this company to come in and help you try to solve it. The goal is 80%, we're currently at 20%. Click next slide, Brian. So, up front, before we start talking about different options to solve this problem, I want to point out that there is an immense amount of public conversation about the differences between dual stream, single stream, and curb sort. We all understand why curb sort is not an option for us as a city. Is there any issue? I mean, it makes sense for single-family residential units. It does not make sense in any other industry. If we want to reach 50% recycling, it's not going to happen with curb sort. That's just the fact, right? So at that moment, you have a decision to make. You have dual stream, you have single stream, and I'm going to go through a number of other variations of both of those. You are going to hear, if you are educating yourself about this conversation, all of these things. there is a whole lot of negative and positive information coming out about single stream and dual stream, specifically single stream. This is our local paper. We even get it locally, which is awesome. We have an informed enough public where we're having op-eds about trash in our local paper. I think that says a lot for our community. In general, there are two things that when you actually read these articles come out of them. Right? One of them is education is absolutely the most important part of any system. It doesn't matter how much technology or investment you put into your facility, if you don't educate your populace on how to use it, it will not work. Period. Every single one of these will tell you that. The other thing that's really important that comes out of this is there are people involved in recycling. If there's a curb sort, we have guys jumping out of trucks. Doesn't matter if it's 105, doesn't matter if it's 30 degrees outside. They're hand sorting all their curb sort. If you have a single stream, it automates it on the front end, but there's hand sorting on the back end. Doesn't matter how much you invest in technology, people handle trash, which is why education is so important. Because if you're putting dead dogs and cats in your trash can or recycling bin, somebody's going to touch them, right? And as somebody who works in the industry, we see it constantly. It doesn't matter if it's single stream, dual stream, curb sort, blue bag pickup. We get every nasty thing you can imagine in our recycling. Right? We get, rotten cream corn. Maggots are like daily. Everything else is a little bit less likely. So it's a nasty industry. Cleaning it up takes a ton of education and a ton of work on all fronts. So then the question is, how do you make a decision between dual stream and single stream? There's going to be a lot of questions, so I'm trying to keep this very, very compact. There's a lot more information out there and a lot more we can go over. Some of the things I want to explain to you. So a single stream versus curb sort, or a single stream versus dual stream. If you can see, you have X number of bins. Some of the bins on dual streams now come actually where it's one bin with two sides, and they have an automatic loader that tips it into two separate compartments. It's actually pretty impressive. In dual stream, you separate out your fibers. We'll go over this in a minute, but fibers are the biggest thing to keep clean, the hardest thing to keep clean, your papers, right? If they get wet, they can get ruined. If they get food on them, they can get ruined. If they get glass in them, they can get ruined. It's really easy to screw up your fibers. So in a traditional dual stream, you have containers on one side. Usually that includes glass. So you have glass, metal, and bottles. On the other side, you have all your fibers. A single stream is all in one bin. That's kind of the general rundown. It's important to remember both of these have, generally, at this point, both of these have automatic pickup. So in either one of these systems, there is not somebody looking through your recycling as they recycle it. Right? So no matter what, if we switch from a curb sort, that immediate responsibility on the consumer and relationship between the consumer and their trash is going to change. The data that I have up here, and I can cite all this data, I'll send out an email to Peter with all of the links and everything if you all want to read over this on your own. The data up here is effectively looking at the effect of single stream versus dual stream on different parts of the operation. So on the back end, contamination is the one that comes up the most. In a dual stream, you have less contamination than in a single stream. That is, generally speaking, a fact. Right? If you mix everything together, you're going to have more that gets ruined than if you don't mix things together. What you're looking for is overall impact. So generally, when you introduce a single stream program, the number of people that participates goes up drastically. There's lots of data behind that. We'll go over some of it in a minute. But in general, when you introduce a single stream, a whole bunch more people participate than in a dual stream. Now, part of that is definitely education. Unfortunately, it is the reality of our world that you can educate somebody and they will refuse to do something because it is not convenient for them. They will tell you they're not going to do it because it's not convenient for them. I do not buy the argument that you can educate your way out of this problem because I have seen no data anywhere in the country that shows that. Good education goes a long way. It does not solve the problem. So, you're looking at a single stream versus a dual stream, and part of this is a history lesson. So single streams started developing in the early 90s in California. California, as usual, was driving these mandates of we need to recycle more, need to recycle more. So they said, oh, well, we're going to start taking everything in one bin. Ended up they had a really nasty product. Incredibly dirty. They had residual rates above 40%. So basically you're pulling 50% of that recyclable out and sending it straight to the landfill. Then they found out they could sell a large majority of that baled overseas. Right? Not our problem. We can ship it to China. China will buy it. They'll sort it through by hand, and then we're great. We can say we have a 100% recycling rate, even if 80% of it goes to China and 60% ends up in a river in China. This happens. So, That was, let's say, 95 till 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. The number of single streams in the country, we had 4 in 1989, we had 45 in 1999, we had 90 in 2005, we had 160 in 2009. So between 2001 and the financial collapse in 2007, we had a huge influx of companies coming in, building MRFs. Give us everything. Give us everything. We don't care how clean it is, bad education programs, because you got a market to sell it. Financial collapse happens in 2007, and effectively immediately, China starts monitoring loads coming into the country and rejecting them. Right? This is nasty stuff. We don't want this. Huge, huge problem for American recyclers. They have set up really bad single-stream recycling programs with very bad public education, and all of a sudden they can't move the products that they've been able to move. At the same time, the market collapses, which destroys all of our recycling markets. So those numbers go from $60 or $70 a ton to $20 or $25 a ton. There were some places that wouldn't even take your recycling. You could pay them. Brian, for a while, was paying to get rid of glass. He would pay somebody to come pick it up. So, at this point, if you look at the kind of development of single stream, there's a huge boom of investment and relatively low-end technology. And then overnight that collapsed and it destroyed the entire market. Recyclers were no longer making money. They started sending more things to landfills. Over the course of the last 8 or 9 years, the industry has responded to this in various ways. Dual stream has gotten better. Single stream has gotten better. Our technology has blown up. Mitch Kessler, who's the head of the consulting company that we've been working with, his kind of line is we're on the 5th generation of technology in the last 20 years. That's how quickly things are changing. I only use that to point out when you are dealing with a new program coming in, your data is only as good as it is relevant to what you want to build. So if you bring me a piece of paper that says dual stream is awesome and this is why, right, and that's not what we're going to build here, that data is meaningless. If you come up and say single stream is great, it works, look at this place here, it does a great job with it. Unless that's what we're going to build here, that is absolutely irrelevant data, which is why data collection is so important when we're trying to figure out how to do this. A couple of things to consider. When you're looking at this program, everybody loves to talk about contamination and running a MRF. You have to remember that when you're looking at this from the city's standpoint, they're talking about labor costs, hauling costs, how much does it cost to buy the truck, how many routes can that truck do, how many homes in an hour can that truck do. This is a systemic issue. This is not a MRF issue. Play that one more time. Glass. You cannot talk about single stream without talking about glass, because glass is far and away the biggest issue with any collection. Glass is heavy, it breaks, it destroys equipment, and once it breaks, effectively, it can't be used as well. I mean, I don't mean like broken like you drop a beer bottle, I mean shattered. So traditionally, when you're dealing with single stream and dual streams, you have a huge change in your usability of glass. So glass, you lose about 40% of it, give or take, that effectively becomes what's called fill. You can use it for road fill, you can use it for landfill cover. It's downcycling, right? You're not turning it into anything else. You're not putting it in the landfill, but using it once. Right? That's one of the big arguments against incineration, right? You use it one time. Not recycling, that's downcycling. So 40% of glass in a traditional single-stream program is downcycled. 20% of it you completely use, 40% of it can be used. As you can see in a dual stream, when you keep that out separate, and some dual streams have completely separate glass collection. We'll get to in a minute. In a dual stream, you separate that glass out, and that has a substantially higher rate of usability of your glass. And again, glass is very, very heavy, so that makes a huge difference. This last one is my favorite. This is a deposit return system. I'm not advocating for or against the deposit container system. I'm just pointing out that that completely solves the problem. Next slide. So, I'm going to go over 2 case studies here. Both of these case studies are places that started with a dual stream and switched to a single stream. The first one is actually 3. It's 3 programs out of New York. This was done by the Solid Waste Associations of New York. They did a huge study that they published in 2010 going over the effects of single stream on their programs that were originally dual stream. I point this out, I use this slide specifically. They go over these programs and effectively just blast single stream. Right? All of these facilities were built between 2001 and 2004, again, when there were markets, when there was a ton of low financial investment to build programs quickly. And not only were their single streams less efficient, they actually cost more. So they ended up losing money twice. They were selling less total recyclables, and they were paying more. This is single stream done extremely poorly. There is buckets of data and a whole bunch of case studies for single stream done poorly. Right? In this specific example, they didn't have any optical sorters. They had incredibly low in technology for sorting this. But again, we have lots of these examples nationally. The other one I'd like to mention is kind of the far other version, and that's Chula Vista, California. They had a dual stream program for years, an incredibly active populace. They have a $300,000 education budget just for their recycling program. $300,000 of public money goes just to educating the public every single year. And they decided to switch from dual stream to single stream because they had a clean product, but they weren't getting the volume they wanted, even with a $300,000 education program. They implemented single stream. Their residual rate, their contamination rate for their dual stream was 3%. When they switched to a single stream, their contamination went up to 9%. The tonnage doubled, far and away outdoing the investment that they had on the front end. Now, that sounds like a great example of single stream. A couple of things to mention about Chula Vista. First of all, they had a $300,000 public education budget for recycling. Second of all, they have a container law. Third of all, they have a pay-as-you-throw program. So your bins are larger, you have to pay more for a larger trash bin. Recycling stays at a flat rate. That's an included cost. Also, they're in a state with a deposit law. So there's a number of different factors that come into determining how these things work. All I mean to point out is this is a program that has a 9% contamination rate with a fully integrated single-stream facility. The one before was sitting at over 60% contamination. There were loads that were getting rid of well over half. Again, the question of data. There are great programs and there are awful programs. All that matters is the program we want. What we build and relevant data for what we want goes way farther than any comparable national data that we're going to have, because there's so many factors involved. Market factors, social factors, regional factors. Where we are in the country matters. Our markets are different than other people's. Our shipping routes are different than other people's. And culturally, socially, we're very different than other people. Try that one more time. So, you can just start clicking through these. Effectively, what we're trying to come up with is a massive algorithm to decide how to make this decision. So, if you look at this, and we can go through any of these kind of, I'll finish up so you all can start asking questions. But effectively, all of these things are going to have some say in how you make the most responsible decision. And not only are we deciding between single stream and dual stream, we're deciding between what kind. There's some dual streams that are containers and fibers. There's some dual streams that are containers, fibers, and oh, you got a glass drop off down the street. There's some single streams that are everything but glass in this single stream. There's some single streams that are everything. You have a whole bunch of decisions to be made internally. And there's a whole bunch of variables that are going to affect those. What's most important to me is this last point, right? Which is your RFP, when you solicit, when you say, I want to build this, how much are you going to charge me to build it, or what's the partnership to build it? You have the ability to demand exactly what your community wants. This is your tool, right? The tool that we have when we're making this decision is we can decide exactly what we want Fayetteville to look like. So you have an immense amount of control over this, but you have to remember all of these things have something to do with it. The other thing to remember is Fayetteville is a town of 75,000 people. We have a region of 500,000 people. 75,000 people cannot build a single-stream facility that is going to have a residual rate of under 10%, because it's going to cost way more than our entire tax budget, right? As a region, we begin to have the opportunities to talk larger scale, right? We have a whole bunch of facilities that are working at a relatively low rate. We have the ability to come together, work as a region, and build a facility that actually does what we want it to do. What's also unique about our area is we have an immense amount of private competition, effectively. Right? Northwest Arkansas is a booming region. We have a whole bunch of industry that wants to be here. That is just the same in the waste industry. There's a reason we have 4 or 5 major national waste companies in our region. That gives us the opportunity to effectively be in a position of power. When we are looking for what we want, we should be able to demand relatively specifically what we want and get it within reason. Finding ways to navigate that conversation begins with public education. I don't expect you at the end of this to understand all of these nuances. I expect you to understand that it's really hard to understand. So when you open up the paper and it says, this is great, this is awful, the answer is probably somewhere in between every single time. One more slide. From a regional standpoint, these are just a couple of the things that at the district we want Fayetteville to know. Right? First of all, the goal is landfill diversion, resource recovery, energy savings, and program sustainability. All of these have their own set of variables. Right? There's places they overlap, but we have to take into consideration all of them to be able to make these decisions. Data. Data, data, data. Localized data is so much more important. If I haven't made anything else clear, let me make it clear that our data nationally is awful. It's incredibly difficult to use. It's not very relatable to our current situation. So collecting localized data is incredibly important. Having that localized data in our hands is incredibly important. Kessler is currently starting a single stream pilot. That came up at last City Council. That was a relatively contentious issue. From the district standpoint, we were in favor of it, not because we're here screaming about single stream, but because localized data is that important. It is that meaningful to us. As a region, we're basically sitting here watching Fayetteville. Y'all are the only city in our entire region that is investing in waste infrastructure. You're the only one investing in data. That data is way more important than just Fayetteville. We are going to be using that regionally for years. So thank you, right, on behalf of the region, but also pay attention to it. That data means way more than anything you'll read on the internet. Honest cost to consumers is really important. This is something that I put in every single presentation I ever give. Recycling costs money. It is not free. Anyone that tells you recycling is free is lying to you. It costs less than trash, so we have a cost diversion savings there, but it costs money. You are paying for your recycling in the city of Fayetteville right now. You might not see it, but it's there. That's an industry cost, an industry decision that was made 15 or 20 years ago because they were trying to get people to recycle. They said, oh, we'll include this cost on a water bill or sink it into the overall bill of the trash, and that will make people recycle because they won't think they're paying for it, rather than making them do the math of this much for recycling, this much for trash. It's really coming back to bite us now.
I might make a comment, just, you know, you said that recycling costs less than trash. There may be times when it doesn't cost less than trash because, you know, and again, I'm not being pro landfill here, although I work for a landfill company in full disclosure. But, you know, our landfill rates in this region are cheap. You know, we complain about them, but, you know, you should see how high they are, you know, northeast and in the west coast and stuff. But that's one of the challenges of recycling is the landfill rates are really cheap. And so it's hard to cost justify and get that return on investment from the recycling because comparing it to landfill is cheap. So sometimes recycling, if you want to do it, you know, the processing costs and transportation, collection, all this that you've mentioned, may cost more than landfilling.
Right. Well, and realize in that first one, I do not mention costs in there. Costs are important. The price definitely matters, but in my mind, that's not why we make a decision. Right? We have a moral obligation. And honestly, if you look at it in the long run, right, 50, 100 years, then those cost savings start realizing. But yeah, right now, we have some of the cheapest landfill rates in the country. We are well under half of the landfill rates in the Northeast and on the West Coast. So I get nervous when people start making this great financial argument for recycling. Yes, our waste stream is a pool of resources. But if we want to say we're making our decisions based on money, stop recycling on things that don't make us money. That's not what we want to do. That's obviously not sustainable, and that's why sustainability for me and energy savings go a lot farther than once you start to talk about the actual cost savings of recycling. Auditing and oversight, this is really important to include. It's really important to be mindful of. Whatever program you have, audit it. Make sure you have a mechanism in place to be able to know what's actually happening. Fayetteville, again, does better at this than any other city probably in the state. And we're a region, not a city. This goes a long way for me. It is so frustrating as a Fayetteville resident to go from being a resident of Fayetteville, where it's like, hurrah, Fayetteville, to walking outside of that and feeling like Fayetteville is a bubble. And you're either in it or you're not. And I think that the rhetoric often mirrors that. And I really want to push Fayetteville as a city to realize the role that it can take as a regional leader. But that takes a little bit of humbling and realizing that not everybody is Fayetteville, and that as a region, we have the ability to diversify, and that maybe that's a good thing. So I think we can click that one more time. Oh, yeah, collection is not recycling, recycling is recycling. Right? This is with your data. If you collect it, you did not recycle it. You just collected it. If you recycled it, you recycled it. It's really important when you're talking about in life of your product. That's all I have. There are 1,000 tangents that we could go off of this. I could talk for another 4 hours without stopping, but I'm not going to do that to you yet. And again, I'm here representing the Boston Mountain Solid Waste District. I do sit on this committee as a resident, but as a regional organization, we're really trying to educate the public about who we are and what we do. We serve as a resource for you. We work with Peter in the city all the time. We work with all of our cities. Talk to us. If you have a question, you can call us. That's why we are here. That's literally the existence of our organization is for our region. So that's something that's kind of my shameless plug. So, questions, comments, remarks?
I have a question. And it goes back to a letter to the editor that, or something. It was some editor.
Yeah, it's up there.
Okay, and I actually didn't read the whole thing, but I've always known that Fayetteville looks to see where the recycling goes, and they don't sell to people that are not safe, which I think is wonderful. And then there was something in the paper about how all this stuff is going to go to China now, where we don't really know where it's going to go, and we don't know what they're going to do with it, blah, blah, blah. So I would like you to comment on that.
Right. So you'll hear a lot of things said, unless there's some kind of, first of all, nothing has been decided. I think it's really important to realize the city of Fayetteville has adopted 0 things, other than we want an 80% diversion, and we're going to pay this company to do a waste audit for us and give us some recommendations. They haven't even accepted the recommendations, because their recommendations aren't even done. So when we start talking about what's going to happen, it's really easy to say, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. Currently, you would have to change some legislation to export any trash. Because currently Fayetteville has, I believe, legislation that says you have to show end life of all recyclables.
Oh, okay.
So currently, that couldn't happen. That would have to come up and be changed first. When you start talking about exporting trash, you are years down the line from where we are right now of even addressing that situation. Again, we don't even have a facility to decide. We don't even know what kind of facility we're going to recommend, much less build. Even once we build it, then it's going to be the conversation of what stops do we want in place? Do we want to do all domestic recycling? That effectively is something you can put in an RFP. You put out your RFP and you say, we don't export trash.
And Connie, just to further Rob's answer, as that conversation has come up when we've been talking with our consultant, the advice they've given us is that, we've told them we have this requirement that Rob described, and they've told us, as changes are implemented or recommendations for changes are implemented, we can be very specific with anyone we want to contract with that we want to and require that chain of custody and reporting requirements stay with all of our recyclables so that we don't lose that accountability that we have right now.
Right, so that was just somebody saying something that.
I can alleviate probably any anxiety, let you know that,
I
most of our markets that we sell to are really in this region. We're talking about the paper markets, all those fiber from, cardboard, newspaper, mixed paper, that's all staying in this region, either in Louisiana, Oklahoma, or Arkansas, or, Missouri. Newspaper goes to Joplin. The plastics and the metals, those are open bids, so they can go anywhere across the country. They mostly go to the southeast part of the country, but we don't sell anything overseas to anybody on a regular basis. In fact, I think I've only sold 1 load of PET to a Chinese market, and that was 2004 or 5 or something like that. So all this stuff is staying domestically, and alleviates anybody's concerns.
It's nice to know that in case it comes up, which, scare tactics often do.
Either of you can probably answer this, maybe Brian even more, but what's it gonna take, or is it in the works for 3 through 7?
The interesting thing with 3 through 7s is 2 years ago, you couldn't find a domestic market for that. And that was a lot of the anxiety of stuff going overseas, 3 through 7s. What was happening to them? We don't know. Most of it probably got thrown away in illegal fashions, probably. However, in this last year, there's facilities being built for mixed plastics, 3 through 7s in particular. One of them is in St. Louis. I went and toured that recently. And even though they say they'll take 3 through 7s, they really can't take 3 through 7s. They can do a little bit of the 3s, which is PVC, not much of that. The 4s, the 5s, the 6s, which is polystyrene, they can do that, like the solo cups. They can't do the expanded polystyrene, which is foam. The 7s, they don't want the 7s, because the 7s are fouls, like Rob was saying.
It means other.
Right.
It's just, there's too many different types of plastics
Yeah.
in that other, and they can't really do anything with that.
Well, and the history behind that, so part of the 3 through 7, again, you can only recycle like entities. So there's a couple ways to do this. When the green fence got put up, so when the market crashed, China stopped taking the vast majority of American recyclables, that put a domestic demand for moving 3 through 7s. So a lot of companies have popped up, and honestly, a lot of them didn't last very long. Because it's really hard to separate all of those things into usable markets, and there's a really low volume of each one. So you have to find a product you can make out of like a mix of 4s and some 6s and 5s, and I'm pelletizing this that can be put in a 3D printer, or I'm pelletizing this and can be turned into buckets for Walmart. I mean, it's really, again, recycling is a specialty market.
Right.
So the largest investment, first of all, 3 through 7s in general, they're a problem the way they're made, right? So from a industry standpoint, I would say what we need to move toward is not making so many 3 through 7s.
Right. of course.
But let's assume that's the case and we're not going to win that battle. The next thing that's being invested in at a high level is effectively plastics to oil. So all plastics are made from oil. Basically, there is technology that turns those plastics back into oil. Now again, questionable quality. So I'm not, it kind of balances the line of downcycling and recycling and what ends up happening if you're going to burn it, what do you know. The other thing to think about with that is the economy of scale. There's a company that's gotten the most, it's called Agilix. They've gotten the most hype about plastics back to oil. They've done a bunch of research. They got millions and millions of dollars of investment and are yet to take a public load of recycling. Even if they did get this problem, the last people that are going to see it are the public, because we're the dirtiest, nastiest products they can get. Right? They can go to the industry and say, oh, you got a bunch of 3s and 7s? I want you to wash them all and give them all to me, because I'll get them at whatever rate cheaper than you already have. So the way recycling goes is they're going to solve the problem for the industry and then maybe the public. But they're going to charge for it, and Agilix has been bought by Waste Management, I believe.
Well, we've got, I think, an investment, but we don't own it. But I was gonna say, even they don't like number 3s.
Yeah.
You know, the vinyl,
Right.
polyvinyl chloride, that chlorine, for some reason is just nasty. So, almost, there's very few, unless you've got pure PVC, you know, then you can find a market for it. Like I said, if you had a truckload, which nobody does. Yeah, nobody likes that. Even the fuel pellets and incineration and waste energy and all that, they don't like PVC either because of chlorine. It's a bad actor. So yeah, that's a big headache all the way around.
The other thing I was going to throw out about Rob showed the example of the bottle and the microwavable tray.
Right.
In the facility in St. Louis, they can't take that tray. It's black. They separate through optical sorting, so the optical sorter can't read black. So that's just a loss in their process. And it was really fascinating because what they did, I've seen optical sorting in a MRF situation where you have whole bottles and containers going through and going to the end of the line, and air shooting it off into its own little bin. They actually ground up that plastic on the front end. So if you can imagine bales of 3 through 7 mixed plastics, which, by the way, they don't want plastic bags, anything like that. They want containers. They grind it all up, they run it through the process, and they hit that optical sorting line, and I mean, it was it was like a fan hit that. And all this plastic just is flying everywhere, and it's shooting off into its own little places. And they take that and they refine it, they do it again, they separate it out again, and again and again. So they finally get to a point where all of the 3s, 4s, 5s, everything is separated out. And they can wash that, and they can either sell it as flake or they can pelletize it and use it for industry. So it's really fascinating, and there's another facility that's coming online in Baltimore later this year. So we're starting to see a domestic answer for this, because all these MRFs are collecting this stuff, and a lot of it goes to trash right now because there's no markets to send it to. The other thing that I'll throw out about that is currently right now I'm getting 24, 25 cents for our milk jugs, about 12 to 13, 14 cents for PET pop bottles. 3 through 7s, you're gonna be lucky to get a penny or 2.
I know the margins are extremely low. I'd also bring up, I know Tyson headquarters, I don't know plans or stuff, but their headquarters this year partnered with a small firm in Missouri. I think it's outside Joplin, don't quote me on that, called All Points, and they come and pick them up, 3 through 7. They just start doing that. I mean, their pitch is more of a micro, go for commercial recycling, since you're going to get, let's say, a lot of people drink soda and stuff at commercial ventures of any sort, and when you get a big corporation, Walmart, Tyson, they can get a higher volume and almost all pre-sorted because it's at a micro level. Would that be something that we could start, not saying that company, but companies like that or that model?
Well, they're a broker.
Right.
I'm not sure what facility they do have. They do broker those with materials off of recycling. My guess is that they're sending those to a facility that can sort from there. So a facility like St. Louis, I mentioned, something, they've got somebody somewhere that they can send that stuff to.
And again, the biggest problem is with commercial, you can mandate that a commercial industry does something, and they will. So Walmart recently actually started a new business in our area that's doing recycled soft plastics to milk jugs, or to the ice cream tubs. And they're making these ice cream tubs locally. It's awesome. But again, your feedstock is so manageable. You say, Walmart, we want this, we want it to look like this. You can't tell the public, we want this to look like this, because it won't.
One of our challenges with the current curb sort collection system related to 3 through 7s is that our current trucks that we curb sort into are maxed out in terms of bin capacity. So if we wanted to add 3 through 7s in our current system, we can't do it because there's not room on the truck.
And that's a lot with the multiple bins on trucks. You'll see when you get into the data, especially dual sort versus single stream. If you have a dual sort, when one of those bins fills, your truck's going back. So the number of houses you can do on a route, curb sort is way lower. I don't know what y'all are at. National average is
360, I think.
how many in an hour?
Oh, that's a whole route.
Right.
About 70, 75 minutes.
Yeah, generally between 70 and 80. A dual sort, you're talking 130. A single stream, you're talking 160 to 200. So that's also, and what I always tie that into is the environmental impact, right? You have trucks running, that's burning gas,
Right.
That's labor, that's on and on. It gets really tough. I mean, the more...
And wasted space, like you
Right,
said.
yeah. And it might not be super popular, and we're moving away from curb sort. I think that's
Oh, I know.
pretty clear. And so then the question is, how do you deal with it?
I'll throw this little number out so you kind of get it in your mind. We have 10 recycling trucks on route each day, Monday through Thursday. They pick up 60-some odd percent of the houses in Fayetteville out of those 10 trucks. We have 7 automated trucks that pick up the cars that pick up 100% of the households'
Trash.
Yeah.
trash. So you can see there that, if we went to a system like our automated trash where we give the resident a cart, the savings on the collection side. And that there's that argument for, we save here, but then we have to give up something on the processing side.
Yep. Labor's expensive.
All right, well, thanks, Rob. I think we learned quite a bit.
Yeah, one question about, how many states and municipalities possibly to have glass return
That's a good question. Probably, yeah, it's 10 or less. The big ones generally are Michigan, New York, California. Yeah, most of the upper northeast, New Hampshire.
Oregon has a bottle bill.
Oregon, yeah. And again, when it gets into legislation, it gets really contentious, especially in the South.
Because, why?
Because there's a lot of people that don't want,
Distributors don't want
yeah, that,
Right.
don't want.
Grocery stores don't.
Well, yeah, so first of all, the industry, there's certain industries that spend a lot of money making sure bottle bills don't pass. So you're fighting that on one hand. But from the public in the South, there tends to be a larger lean of contingency of individuals that don't want the government mandating things. So, right, I mean, you have a number of options when you get into legislation. You could mandate recycling. You could add, or you could, another way, people talk about trash cops a lot, right? Like a lot of places, they'll give you a $3 or $5 ticket if you have, there's two ways to do this. One is you mandate recycling and you charge somebody, give somebody a ticket if they put recyclables in the trash. The other way to do this, the kind of less coercive way, is you mandate clean recycling. So you can put your recycling in the trash, but you cannot put your trash in the recycling. And then you have somebody spot check and hand out tickets. That is very unpopular in the South. And then once you get into container laws, those have, I recommend at some point you Google container laws and the history of container laws and the companies and individuals that created and fought container laws. We haven't had a container law passed in decades.
The closest container law that was ever in place near us was in Columbia, Missouri, and was actually repealed.
At the state level?
No, at the the local level. It was a local container law for the city of Columbia, and it was repealed. You remember how long ago, Brian? It's been probably at least 10 years. But other than that,
Yeah.
that had
And
gone a
the
long
state
ways.
one, I mean, they're all old. I mean, the container, there was actually a movement toward container deposit laws, and it happened, and there was a response, and effectively the response won. So the ones that got it passed within a very short amount of time, about 30 years ago, got them passed, and then the other side won, and it has held ground for the last couple of decades.
What do you mean by container laws?
So that is a deposit on the container.
Oh,
So
okay.
effectively, you have to. In New York, I lived in New York for a while, and you would go in, and you'd put it in and smash it, and you'd get a receipt. You'd go inside, and you'd get your money back.
What happens, Connie, is you go to choose your store to buy a 6-pack of choose your beverage, and the price tag on it is $2. You know, if it's a 5-cent deposit, you actually pay $2.30 at the register. So you pay 5 cents for each bottle, and you can get that 5 cents back when you return.
Right, okay, that's what container laws are.
Right. Yeah. Those are container deposit laws. Yeah.
Just deposit.
And I don't know that there's any in the South. I think that they're all northeast to northwest. Yeah.
Interesting.
But long ago, there were very few kinds of containers, so Coca-Cola had
Glass in the
other,
corner.
it was glass that was, with a new cap on, you didn't have to crush it and then start over to make something. That was, and every little kid knew to pick them up and take them to the store.
Bless you. My share.
Yep.
It's a different world, it's intentional waste, I mean, it's like a landfill. Destroy it.
Yep.
This isn't specifically addressing your talk, but I guess for Peter and Brian, the Kessler study, whenever they're done, I mean, it's going to look at everything. I mean, we all talked about it, but organics as well as recycling, construction, demolition, debris, multifamily and apartments and commercial and restaurants, you know, all this whole big scope. So they're gonna report back to the city council, hey, to get your 80% goal in 10 years, here's what we think it would take. I mean, that's kind of how it's gonna.
Yeah, they're gonna present it in a, sort of a cost-benefit
Yeah.
scenario analysis for us. So
Yeah.
you implement this item at this cost, and here's your benefit in terms of diversion rate, you know, related to organics, related to recycling, related to construction and demolition waste.
So like
And-
each section could end up result in RFPs and further discussion, obviously, to figure
Yeah.
out how much is it worth the city to spend to do organics or to do.
And I think that's
construction.
where, you know, Rob's point about the regional
Right.
aspect of this comes really into play, because we can't do this there's certain things we can do, obviously, you know, we're doing a food waste organics
Right.
pilot on our current site, and we can, according to the consultant, feasibly take the organics that are in our waste stream and do it on our own site. But then Springdale and Bentonville and Rock, none of them can
Right.
bring any stuff down here.
Right.
So what are some of the prospects for regional collaboration on that?
We're still working through that. That was part of this diversion goals. We've had stakeholder meetings with other cities. Got a lot of interest from other cities. But I think Rob's right. I think they're kind of waiting and looking at us to see what this plan looks like and see what kind of costs are associated.
We've
That's
developed.
where anybody's going to.
Yeah, so we have effectively a coalition that we've built, and we currently, Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, Bentonville is not so communicative. Bella Vista, we've had some contact with. Fort Smith is very interested. So effectively, the people that are coming to the table regularly at when we have these meetings, it's Fort Smith, Fayetteville, Springdale is committed now. Their mayor is really interested, and Rogers, and then all of the rural communities are very interested. Your West Forks, usually we represent those through the district. They'll be at the next meeting that we have coming up here in September. But effectively, what we want to do is we want to look at. We're trying to collect regional data, so we need a regional tonnage mark, right? So we need to say 25,000 tons of recycling a year, or whatever that number is, because that's what a business would want to see. Right, if I'm business X and I want to put in a bid to build a MRF, effectively, I need tonnage numbers for more than Fayetteville. So we're trying to get those together at this point.
If Fayetteville's the only one that's collected this kind of data, is it reasonable to think that the surrounding area could be extrapolated from our data, or are they going to have to go do their own and find out how they're different?
It's a mix. So effectively what you do is Fayetteville's is the most detailed. We have some regional data. I mean, we get reports from different recycling agencies, and the cities will report data to us. So it's a matter of synthesizing that data, realizing the holes in that data, and then using that and extrapolating from this. Also, once it moves in the direction of a regional effort, once we have data out of Fayetteville, and honestly, a lot of this is also, how's Fayetteville going to respond to this report? Right, you can send out whatever you want. Kessler can make whatever recommendations you want. How is Fayetteville going to respond? Once that's clear, I think it'll be a lot easier for the region to get together around that. So then, if it's going to save them money, they're a lot more willing to put some time into collecting good data. And obviously, us as the waste district, we're more than happy to go into small towns and help them with waste audits and help them gather data and piece through their trash bills and contracts. And I mean, this is, again, the slide a couple ones back, it's pretty complex as far as the number of things you have to take into account. And you also have to remember, no other city has a pay-as-you-throw program. Very few cities have the drop-offs that Fayetteville has, the collection that Fayetteville has. So it's also piecing together this vision of, even if you have this tonnage, how do you get it to that facility? So what haulers are you working with? We have to have the whole industry on board effectively to make that work on a regional level.
You just reminded me of a question I wanted to ask when you showed the slide of Chula Vista.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned they have a pay-as-you-throw program, and they went to single stream.
Mm-hmm.
Are they addressing that issue of contamination and people getting those smaller bins to save money and putting all their trash into the recycling side? Are they addressing that through looking at the bins at the point of collection?
Not at the point of collection. Well, yes, but spot checking. So they effectively have a individual who goes out and spot checks bins. If you have contamination in your bin, you get a ticket. I believe it's $3. If you don't pay 3 of them in a row, they put a lien on your property. So Chula Vista solved that problem real quick. So yeah, they don't have a lot. And again, we're talking about a $3 ticket here, but yeah, I mean, they have legislation that says if you don't pay your I have trash in my recycling bin ticket, they will put a lien on your property.
But more importantly, they have $300,000 of education.
Exactly. And again, they have $300,000 of public education. And, and it shows. I mean, when you look at their website, I did a lot of research on the community. It's a fascinating community. But honestly, I mean, the city of Fayetteville has a whole lot of money going to their education program. And for our region, it's probably about as progressive as you're going to get. And so, I don't know that you're gonna get legislation passed to put liens on people's property for, spot checking recycling bins, but, yeah, but, the
Yeah.
But the population at large, I think, is generally in favor of the move toward a community that looks like that. So it's a matter of navigating the limits and how you make that happen best here. But that's how to do it. They also do take glass in their single stream. I thought that was worth mentioning because that was a big question. Chula Vista takes glass in it. So, because you'll see a lot of people that don't.
But you said they've got a bottle bill, didn't you say?
Yeah, right.
So.
But you can put that in your recycling, yeah, and that actually, they then take that through the process for you, yeah. Because they can sell it because it turns out, even with a bottle bill, people, I mean, it's like, oh, 5 cents, I'm just gonna put this in my recycling bin. So they actually don't realize that cost. So they do get glass, though, again, substantially lower percentage than they're getting anywhere else. Bottle bills, again, unbiased, bottle bills far and away solve the glass problem. They just do. There might be terrible things about them otherwise, but they do solve the glass problem.
I did have another question. Something that I just read about recently that was really interesting was talking about Seattle's compost law that went into effect residentially, where they will actually go and look in your trash.
And that one's not progressive. It was like day one you start doing it.
If you get more than 10%, you get fined. Well, that has, of course, led to a lawsuit. So we're watching that to see how that plays out. Does that have an effect on all these types of scenarios across the country?
Yeah, and that's for real. Seattle Hand, they're all about monitoring their waste stream for consumer responsibility. My sister lives in Seattle, and in an apartment complex, and they have,
Which is included in that compost.
Yes. It's, she's under it. I mean, it's Seattle takes their trash very seriously. And I mean, honestly, you see the results from it. I mean,
What's their diversion rate? Do you have any idea?
I mean, they're going to tell you 70. I have not done any research on how they market recycling, which has a huge effect on what I would say their actual diversion is. So I don't know. It's honestly, when you get into the big cities, especially on the coast, their access to international markets is so easy. And there are, mind you, there are good overseas markets. I mean, we ship all sorts of stuff overseas. I mean, that's not radical. It's a matter of how do you monitor it.
I will say that China has some of the most progressive recycling bills in the world. Their paper, some of those Five Dragons paper bills, best in the world. So.
And they've gotten their version of the EPA has, in the past 5 or 6 years, started a movement toward monitoring the waste industry a lot more closely. Again, there are two sides to that argument, but it is worth noting not every overseas market is bad. There are overseas recyclers that are doing a great job. It just gets, from my perspective, it's really hard to make that call from here. So, and especially from Arkansas when I'm talking about Seattle or Washington, you get your San Franciscos and your Oregons, and looks great. It'd just be a matter of auditing the data. I mean, I'd like to see it. I would love to be the auditor that went into San Francisco and audited their life cycle of their waste stream. That just hasn't been done.
Okay, this is kind of a Kessler question, but jumping ahead to like organics, for example, like Seattle's got a 3-bin system, so they've got trash, recycling, and organics at every household. So behind every house you got 3 bins. So conceivably that might be one direction Kessler would recommend for us. I mean, we don't know yet, but when Kessler does do their recommendations, I mean, part of it is going to be, I mean, now there's a whole other route, I guess, different trucks to collect. I mean, so that's part of that whole equation. I mean, we don't know yet how that's going to shake out, but, so I guess that's part of the cost.
Yeah, definitely, routes and how efficiently the routes are run is certainly part of the economic analysis for recycling, for compost, for trash collection. So.
And that might be a small piece that might be further down the 10-year track anyway, but
I mean, you look at most of these, well, I mean, Fayetteville already does, we already do compost collection at all of our residences.
Well, that's true,
and,
I guess.
Most of these, cities have done, Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco have all incorporated household organics into the already existing yard debris collection programs. So
Also,
they
cart-based program.
what's that?
Cart-based.
Yeah.
So you give a cart for your
Right.
yard waste.
So instead of having the bag, you put your
yard waste in, you
Could
have
be
a cart
really
for it.
a challenge for Fayetteville in the fall, because we
Right.
go by people's homes and there's 30-something bags.
Right.
Leaves lined up there, so, one cart is not.
Yeah.
You can do anything up to
Yeah.
each week for a year, we get rid of all your leaves.
But if I may, that's another part of, aspect of the education. If you educate people to keep the leaves and even brush piles, or all the insects that feed all the birds, and actually utilize that material. I mean, from wildlife protection status, things, recycling it or mulching it or whatever is a waste of it from the life on the earth. Viewpoint.
Be nice if this would self-educate, like responsible people, but unfortunately.
On the organic, I have had several people ask, how far are you going with organic? Anything? I mean, are we talking
On
about
the pilot?
milk, meat,
Oh,
anything?
no, there's definite limitations on
What
what,
do you
like, we
mean?
can't take any raw meat, was the big thing that
But
they.
you could take cooked meat?
Yeah, cooked meat was okay to put into this,
That's the pilot, not.
No, I'm talking about the
current.
pilot, because several people were asking about that milk. Well, they were asking about the smell is what they were getting to, and I believe that's
So,
part of the process.
That's part of the reason we're doing this pilot,
Yeah.
because this type of composting is called modified static aerobic composting.
Mm-hmm.
It's different than our yard waste composting that we do now. We turn those rows weekly. We have, whenever it rains, it adds the water to it. This is totally different. This is taking food waste and laying it out on a bed of organic material, yard waste, capping that, putting enzymes on either end of that pile, and monitoring that, and make sure water's added to that so we can keep the moisture right. And then that doesn't get turned. That's the amazing thing about this process. The enzymes work through that pile, and it creates a chimney effect, allows air to come through, but you don't have to turn the rows. That's where the static part of that comes in. And so 45 days that sits. After 45 days, we turn it. Let's sit 2 more weeks, and then the process is complete in 2 months. Whereas right now, it takes us 4 to 6 months or more for our yard waste compost.
Oh, so this helps
This will speed it up.
speed it up.
According to the,
Okay, now what about the
this will-
smell? That's the thing I keep getting.
The
Is that
enzymes
gonna smell
will,
bad?
for lack of a better scenario, create a shield around that. So if you dig down into the top of that compost row, about 6 inches down, they say, you'll hit this sort of grayish looking material. Well, it's the bacteria. And it forms a shield around that waste and encapsulates that odor, so you don't get the odor.
Well, that's why I use the yard waste. Those are your carbons versus the nitrogens and the other things.
I was in-
Carbons mask the
No,
nitrogen.
yeah,
I was in Charleston, South Carolina in June, and they used Kessler Consulting to help them design their organics collection program, and are currently using this modified aerobic process that Brian talked about. So I went out and toured the facility and put my nose about this far from the pile that they had, that Brian described, and you could just barely detect the slightest hint of odor, but otherwise, absolutely no odor.
Well, and that's an
Yeah.
education piece,
Mhm.
because that's a big deal too. A lot of people are going, you can't put all that stuff together and it doesn't smell bad, but apparently you can.
I didn't know that until
Okay, there you
They're
go.
already paying off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just, to clarify, the pilot that we're running is a commercial compost pilot.
So it's
in Mid- So
commercial.
it's only gonna be commercial
I
customers that are gonna be eligible
That's
to
good to know
participate
that.
during the pilot phase.
And
Yeah.
do they just do it by volunteering? Is that how you're going to do it?
Essentially, yeah, we're looking for partners that are interested in participating, that are willing to be, they're looking to make a difference in reducing their contribution to the waste stream, and wanna work with the city on.
10 to 15 tons a week, and I think that the ones we've already identified were pretty much there.
Oh, okay. Grocery stores, restaurants?
Haven't discussed with a grocery store yet, although that would be great. But university, a few restaurants,
Oh, okay.
school district possibly.
Okay.
All right. well, I guess, we've kind of exhausted that topic a little bit, haven't we? All right, yeah, no kidding. All right, we've got an agenda addition brought by Aubrey, some, watershed photos you wanted to share with us?
I believe this gentleman already opened one.
Oh, I had it was flipping through your pictures earlier.
I don't know how I could share very many of them, unless Peter opened.
later, I guess I'll get
Yeah, I.
But some of you, all of you received, well, not you, I guess you weren't on the list yet, but received maybe the pictures, in batch. And there were several places, one focus was 112 Drive-In on, just across from Sam's and just north of the, auto park. And what occurred there was our extended rainfall in the spring prevented anybody from mowing. And on what date here? Back on the 14th of July, started being mowed. And of course, one of the big things from wildlife concerns we have is monarch butterflies. Everybody's heard about, plant one of the 12 species of milkweed that grows naturally in northwest Arkansas, preferably all of them if you've got room. And if a monarch happens to show up, and there are some this year, I've got photographed quite a few, but it's not like it was 10 years ago when you just see hordes of them. Anyway, that's the only thing the monarch caterpillars can feed on, is some species of the milkweed plant. And they're beautiful wildflowers that also provide nectar to other pollinators, bees and so forth, and birds feed on them and so forth. But the point is that because of that rain, thousands, literally, and I mean actually, literally, grew on the few acres that go around on both sides of that place. And of course, that was true in many other fields that weren't mowed, former prairie in northwest Arkansas. But within 2 weeks of the last big storm, it got dry enough, and all those were mowed down. And there may have been some caterpillars on some of those milkweed plants. I didn't investigate that. But I happened to go out there before it was mowed and had captured a bunch of photos of those milkweed plants. They all look alike in a way, but if you look on my pictures, you'll see 100 different ones at least in a photo. But at the same time, there were some other native plants that wetland species of the the button bushes and swamp milkweed, which wasn't growing out in the middle of that area. And that was attacked by a mower where the water comes out and goes down into the, next to Sam's Club and on down into the protected area, that formerly called it Audubon land. It's, under land trust management right now. But anyhow, that area also had, was one of the first things, because the first thing that got out was the trucks that mow the right-of-ways. I don't know why they mow the right-of-ways. You know what's left after they mow? All the trash that people throw out of their cars, and it gets just scattered in little pieces, so you can't pick it up. The mowing guys are not responsible for getting off the machine, going through the tall grass and picking out the trash, and we don't have enough volunteers doing it, which all of you probably done a little bit of yourselves, either on the streams or on the roadways. So the mowing gets done whether it needs it or not. And from the environmental standpoint, mowing in the summer means killing the native plants that harbor and feed our wildlife, and encourage things like invasive trees and so forth to grow, but and vines that are not native. And if you want to restore a prairie, all you've got to do is stop mowing that hay field in the summer, mow it, make hay late in the fall, maybe once, and then don't mow during the growing season, and you get the native plants back.
Aubrey, do you know if those fields are private property or public owned?
Oh, different ones. I think the ones by the 112 drive-in just happen to be my example. But, and it may belong to the same people who own the drive-in or the same people who own the auto thing. And they're slated for development in a few years, just like that's straight across the street from the property that we went and talked about. It's potential rezoning that's going ahead like crazy. The other thing that was going on during that period was the flooding that we discussed down at the what's it called, Razorback Golf Club, and I did document with photos some of the long distance shots there. The flooding after it was subsided. You know, I don't go out in the rain all day. I used to do that, but you know how much these things cost. Take them out in the rain, and the little waterproof ones don't make that. You can't zoom much with them. But anyway, you could still see how much potential there was. And talking to people on the street in those subdivisions, that were, some of them were here for Ward 4 meetings and so forth, and council and whatnot, planning commission. Obviously, there's sound reasons not to build on that area. And, you know, I heard somebody, even one council member maybe said something else. Well, we can pipe water, we can pump water, we can do all these things. No. You can't pump it back in the sky when the whole place is covered with it, and it's pouring off the hillside, and, you know, it's running through yards, it's going through.
Ship it out to California.
Everything. Yeah, well, you know, it's, when it does it there, it's worse than it is here. We're sort of, we still got the soil in place, we still got vegetation, and it doesn't go away. But, anyway, all those things are demonstrated there, and this one picture that, can you kind of hold that up for people?
Yeah, I saw that today.
That picture is of a subdivision at the west end of the Audubon protected area. And the water comes down behind it, and you can see the way they built it. That's a street that I'm parked on, and, potential area there with a sidewalk and so forth. And the yard's full of water. I got down low, you can see in some of the pictures, and the water level already was within about a foot of the floor of the house. And it could have been up to that, you know, in the days previous to that, when it was really raining, it was flowing down. But I think Connie did comment, well, what can we do about that, maybe?
Well, I wouldn't want to buy that house. That's for sure.
And
Aubrey, I am going to have to leave, but
Okay,
I just
well-
want that I appreciate what you've done, and I want to tell you, you gave me milkweed seed that now are blooming.
are
I'm
blooming?
thinking, yeah, I've
Good,
planted them,
and
and
I
guess
brought
what, they
some,
bloom.
and I'll have some next month, basket flower, American basket
Oh,
flower
okay.
seeds
I'll
to
take
share,
some more of those too.
because they're an annual that is disappearing because it's mowed down in the growing season, it doesn't make seed, and it doesn't come back, it's disappearing.
I got some in my yard now, so thank you.
Good.
right.
Okay, well, anyway, I don't wanna keep us here, we had a nice, long, productive meeting, but, and the other part, in this picture batch is some of this material from the, where the new highway extension to get people from Westville over to the mall. And, of course, on both sides of that bypass, or whatever you wanna call the, what's it called, what road,
Van Ash.
Van Ash, yeah. There were milkweed plants growing out in both those, some very big, and some monarchs working around them and so forth. And they probably got mowed right after I was there that day, but, we really, the concern that some of us have about zoning so that a lot of the land where housing's built and other things, it's not necessary to red dirt it. Keep the soil where it is, and you can keep having good, healthy vegetation. Water will go down into the underground flows that are natural to our streams, rather than having to be piped. No concrete necessary if you've got a nice ditch, or if you've got solid soil, you won't see any runoff of your lawn. Okay, anybody else want to comment? Shut up.
All right, thank you, Aubrey. And I did take a look at your pictures, today too. There can be very enlightening. All right, anyone have any announcements for the group? All right.
Next Environmental Action Committee is Monday, September 21st, 5:30 in this room.
All right. All right. Anybody else? All right, then we are adjourned. Thank y'all.
Thanks.